All right, Alexander, let's talk about the UK and their their massive hole that they're in, their economic hole that they're in, and Rishi Sunak's plan to get them out of the hole. And I think the first thing that Sunak should do is that he should dismiss his 10 Downing Street social media team for that video that they put out there the other day where him and Trudeau are at the G20 and they're allegedly talking to Zelensky on speakerphone.
That's right.
That was
Terrible.
was terrible. But anyway, Rishi Sunak is not off to a good start.
No.
It doesn't seem like he's off to a good start. But
No,
what do you
no,
think?
no. And I mean, we have we've been talking about this in various programs that this is a deteriorating economic situation, and at least the government has acknowledged the fact that it is deteriorating, but its only solution is to make the situation worse, because what is really hurting people, what is inflation, what's hurting people is rising prices, especially the rising energy costs, and the British government is doing nothing about this. What Rishi Sunak and his Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, announced was a big round of tax increases that are going to affect everybody in Britain. And this coming on top, of course, of an inflation crisis and rises in interest rates. And already we're hearing that reports are that over the next year or so, living standards in Britain are going to fall by 7%. Now, when they say 7%, you can be absolutely sure they're going to fall an awful lot more than that. And once the tax increases are there and embedded, then we will move on in about a year, 2 years' time to big cuts, supposedly, in public spending. But we're not yet told exactly what form these cuts will take. And my own personal view is that this British government and its successor, assuming that Keir Starmer wins the next election, will not implement the second part of the programme. They will not implement this huge increase in spending cuts. So what we're going to get in Britain is a situation where the government spends and the government taxes. And that's going to continue irrespective of whether it's Conservative or Labour. And obviously some public spending, you can argue, is necessary. But now it's increasingly public spending trying to stop the various leaks, plug the holes. And we're having an overladen ship. It's spending, it's taxing, investment, business activity is going to be increasingly hurt. It's going to be increasingly pushed down. So overall, what Sunak and Hunt have outlined for us is a future of economic decline. There is no other way to describe this.
The spending on Ukraine, is that
spending
going
on
to be cut?
Ukraine? That not much announced about that at all, because this wasn't really a spending. They didn't talk about spending. They talked about tax increases, but they didn't talk about spending. I think they will cut the spending on Ukraine. But of course, spending on Ukraine itself, the money that they're spending on supporting Ukraine is relatively small. I mean, relative to the big scheme of things. It's the consequences of the sanctions, of the economic war, that is really so crippling. And about that, they're prepared to do nothing.
Do the people of the UK, do they understand this or no?
Yes.
They still believe this is Putin's. What did Hunt call it? I forgot what Hunt called it.
Putin's recession.
Recession or Putin's. Yeah.
Putin's recession. Indeed,
Do they
this is
actually
now
believe
all.
that?
It's all about Putin. Putin is responsible for the fact that Britain is in economic decline. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing for a British government to say that the leader of a foreign country has single-handedly engineered the decline of Britain. I mean, Margaret Thatcher must be absolutely spinning in her grave. So must other leaders, other other British leaders, Attlee, Churchill, all of them. They must be absolutely horrified about this. I mean, because that's now the alibi. We can't do anything. It's not really up to us anymore. We can only, as I said, we can only plaster over the problems because that terrible man in the Kremlin is engineering our recession, our long-term decline. I mean, it's if you think about it, it's also an incredibly defeatist thing to say, but it's a way of running away from responsibility. It's a way of avoiding the big decisions. It's a way of refusing to look at the problems of the economic war, the sanctions war, refusing to change course in any significant way. You're going to continue with the same policies as before, but you're going to tax people more. You're going to make their living standards worse. You're going to deprive people with the opportunities to create their own businesses, to develop their own, ideas. You're going to hit all of that, but you can't possibly change course on the big thing, which is Ukraine.
Well, if Putin has the power to send the UK economy into recession, then he must have the power to lift the UK economy out of recession. So if Sunak and Hunt care about the UK and care about the people of the UK, why don't they just call up Putin and ask him to lift the UK out of recession, since he's got that power over the UK?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something, as I said, a thing to say about Putin, which has never been said before by any British leader of any other foreign leader. Our entire economic future is in the hands of someone else who is our enemy. But why don't they call him? Well, of course, they won't call him because he not only has our economic future in his hands, but he's also the devil incarnate. So we can't talk to him. It's the absolute one thing we are not able or allowed to do.
Well, now, how does the devil incarnate, real quick? How does the devil end up controlling your economy, though?
Well, indeed, exactly. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, eventually, sooner or later, I mean, I can't help but think this. People are going to start putting it all together and are going to start saying this is absurd. I mean, if Putin really is so important to the economic future of Britain, as the British government is itself telling us, then the time has surely come to pick up the telephone and have a word with him and see what we can do to turn things round. And if that means making concessions over Ukraine, I think there will come a point when people will start to demand those concessions. In other words, an easing of the economic war.
Well, I mean, by Hunt's logic, the choice is before the people of the United Kingdom. The choice is Ukraine or UK.
Yeah, you'd have thought so.
I mean, that's the choice that he's put, because Putin controls all of the United Kingdom. He controls the United Kingdom's economy.
Yes.
I mean, he's the reason that the UK is in recession, and he could be the reason why the UK is in growth. So, I think it's a pretty simple choice if you're the finance minister or the prime minister of the United Kingdom.
Bear in mind that it's not just a question of Britain being in recession. It's a question of Britain being in a condition now of permanent decline, because this statement that Hunt gave yesterday offers no real optimism for any change of direction. I mean, if you believe what Hunt is saying, there's going to be massive spending cuts in a few years' time. If you are more cynical, you will say that there won't be spending cuts, but there will be even higher taxes. But one way or the other, it's a recipe for decline. So if the person who holds the keys to your decline is Mr. Putin, then logically you should talk to him. I mean, that's if the only way of escaping that decline is you should talk to him. And as you absolutely rightly say, if all that he really cares about, if Putin's only real concern is Ukraine, if that's the only reason that we are in this situation, then you're absolutely right. It's a case of either Ukraine or the UK. And if you're the British government, you should prioritise, logically, the UK over Ukraine. At the moment, no one in the political class is saying that. No one.
Right. So, yeah. So, why doesn't the UK? Well, maybe this is all part of the plan. I mean, maybe the plan is to tax the public into oblivion.
Yeah.
Maybe that's part of the plan, right?
Well, it might be. I'm sure there are some people who wouldn't mind seeing that happen. There is, obviously, we've talked about this many times, that there's many people who want to see, there's some people, there's a sort of group of people who take the view that the worse things are for everybody, the better it is for them. And I can see that. But I can't imagine that the Conservative Party, the Parliamentary Conservative Party, shares those views.
Can the people? What can the people do? Actually,
Yeah.
What can the people do?
Well, what can the people do? I mean, eventually they have to organise politically and develop alternatives to the political classes that we see today. If we do see a genuine political alternative start to appear, then, of course, at that point, everything changes. But at the moment, the political class is determined to prevent that from ever happening. So we'll see what happens. I mean, it seems to me that we're going to have more economic decline. That's now baked in the cake, if you like, and more political repression going alongside it. Because if you want to stop people asking the obvious questions, which is the ones you've been bringing up to me repeatedly over the course of this programme, then the only way you can do that is by basically restricting their ability to ask those questions. In other words, you crank up censorship even more, and you intensify the various repressive machinery that is already very powerful here.
Why doesn't Sunak just roll back the sanctions and go down in history as the prime minister that saved the UK from catastrophe? Why doesn't he just want to? Why doesn't he just make the right decisions, the simple decisions? These are pretty easy decisions, to be quite honest, and cement his place as one of the greatest prime ministers to ever serve in the United Kingdom, and to assure himself a win in the next elections?
Well, because
why doesn't he do that?
Well, because
it's a very simple choices that he has to make, and he can solve a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, bear in mind about Sunak two things. First of all, he has the lesson of what happened to his predecessor. If he starts reversing course on Ukraine, the same group of people who put him in will probably start making moves to take him out, because they remain absolutely, well, the usual establishment people, international capital, the globalist group, who basically, they're much more interested in waging the economic war against Russia than they are about Britain and about Britain's own position. And remember, Sunak belongs to it. Whatever happens to Britain, he himself is all right. He's not part, if you like, of the economic landscape of Britain in the way that other prime ministers of previous times used to be. So he doesn't feel, I think, under the kind of personal pressure that many people in Britain feel. And at the same time, he knows perfectly well that if he goes against the orthodoxy, the established policies, if you like, that he's going to face all the same kind of problems that Truss did in Britain, for pursuing different policies, admittedly, but she could face those. And of course, perhaps the biggest example, the greatest warning of all, what Donald Trump faced in the United States when he talked about trying to improve relations with Russia. And Sunak doesn't want to be in that position. He'd rather go down and lose, but remain part of the club, than he would to take the enormous political risks which you are asking him to take, even though those might be in the interests of in the interests of Britain.
All right. Anything else that you may want to add?
No, I mean it's a dismally sad picture. I've said this many times, I've never known things in Britain to be so bad. I mean, we now have a shortage of eggs, by the way. You can't find them in British supermarkets. Supposedly it's avian flu, but there's some people who say that it's not really avian flu. It's all related to other supply problems, or that the avian flu is itself a product of this. But again, I was in my local grocery and I noticed again that there were vast gaps in what was available for sale, not just eggs. Lots of things are starting to disappear. Prices are rising. I calculate that food prices in London are probably growing now at an annualised rate of about 20%, not 11%, as the government is saying, but much higher than that. And there just isn't any real sense of what to do. Even The Guardian, which is the newspaper that fervently supports the Labour Party, has admitted that even the Labour Party doesn't know what to do in this situation. That, they had no real response to any of the things that Sunak and Hunt are suggesting. We have a political class that's bankrupt of ideas, that's bankrupting Britain, that's sacrificing the British people to a geopolitical course which doesn't ultimately concern the British people.
What percentage of the British population do you think is aware of the fact that this destruction of the UK is a cause of the support for Ukraine, of the sanctions against Russia?
I think it's still a minority, but I think it's a growing minority. And I say a minority, I reckon there's about 20% of people who were never convinced, who are always, skeptical about the whole Ukraine business right from the beginning. I think that's probably grown to around 40%. Most people, they still get their news from the media. They still follow the news from the media. I don't think they've yet made those connections. Perhaps in a few weeks, in a few months, they will, because things are going down fast. I forgot to also mention that we're now having increasing numbers of strikes. I said, by the way, last week that I was outside England and I was returning to London, and it took hours to drive into London because the traffic was jammed up because the entire railway system was on strike.
It sounds like the UK is not so much of a first world country anymore.
It isn't. I think we shouldn't pretend that it is any longer. It's the other thing is, of course, Sunak is talking about the fact that Britain has to appease the markets, the international financial markets, which again is a terrible admission. It's Putin controls our economy, the international financial markets control our economy, the British people don't. And remember, what was Brexit all about? It was about taking back control. And the political class are saying, well, actually, you've got no control at all. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention. The other thing I forgot to mention is that, of course, Sunak and Hunt, they're saying, that the way we're going to increase growth is by increasing immigration. More immigration is the route now to growth, which again is the opposite of what people thought they were voting for back in 2016.
Yeah, it sounds like there's absolutely zero sovereignty in in the UK at the moment.
No,
I mean,
no.
they control nothing, it seems. Russia
Nothing.
controls your economy. The intelligence agencies are all controlled by the U.S. The financial markets control your markets. I mean, you can't control their borders. What?
Yeah. You're going to
What kind of
throw
country
them
is
open.
this?
Well, then, what kind of a country is this exactly? I'm going to say this. I mean, you have to go back to your earlier question. I get the sense. This is the sense I got as I was travelling around. As I said, it was the West Country, the western part of England. Is that people are very shell shocked. I mean, they just things. The other thing to say is things are happening so fast. Things are getting bad, going from bad to worse so quickly that people just haven't had the time to sit back and think it through. And of course, people are very, very worried because, I mean, we now have real problem of fuel poverty. People can't afford heating. You don't want to be cold in Britain. I mean, temperatures may not be very low by comparison with some other countries, but the climate here is very damp because we're an island. And when it gets cold in the winter, it's very, very uncomfortable. So people are just bewildered and they're afraid and they haven't yet thought through what it all means and why it's happened in the way that it has.
Yeah, I mean, all right. I would just imagine that if you just take a step back and just say, when did everything really go bad?
Yes.
There's 2 points. There's 2 points on the timeline to look at. It's the lockdowns,
Yes.
and the conflict in Ukraine, and not even
Absolutely.
the conflict, the sanctions
Yes.
that you placed against Russia. That's
Well, that's
a
exactly
better way
right.
of phrasing it. It has nothing to do with the conflict.
No.
The
Exactly.
lockdowns, which you imposed on yourself, because that was a decision made by the politicians, and the decision made by the politicians to sanction Russia because they felt that they could get some sort of regime change in Moscow.
Absolutely.
Those are the 2 reference points that the British population needs.
Absolutely. You're completely
look at.
correct.
And that's
You're
when the
completely
wheels
right.
came off.
Absolutely. And can I just say that the way things are turning out with the war of attrition, it's going to be an even bigger hit economically than the lockdowns. But nobody, as I stress again, nobody in the political class is saying this.
Okay. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rockfin as well. And the Duran shop, 10% off. Use the code. Good day. Take care.